Welcome to episode 4. Let's ask our high schoolers what it's like to be in their small town. Please subscribe and like our channel. Leave your comments below. We want to know what you think. Our small town series is asking 12 questions of people who have been in a small town for their entire lives to get a sense of its soul. Each episode answers the following: your family's arrival, a memorable tragedy, defining trauma, coming of age, taking chances, mistakes made, settling down, being the adult, a life lesson, your work ethic, and your accomplishments. Question 4. Our trip will be from the late 60s to the present time. And I say trip because sometimes that transition was one. Swing rock and roll was being driven out by the Beatles, new guys like Bob Seger, Ted Nugent, and Stevie Wonder. They called it the British invasion because music was no longer local. Teens were being invaded from everywhere. Here's a snapshot of teenagers in a small town as they head into adulthood.
When we were growing up, South Lyon was pretty self-contained. You didn't really need to go anywhere. You know, we had an automobile place to buy a car, we had appliances and furniture, we had dress shop.
What was going on in New Hudson in the 60s? Was it even a town?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
We had the stagecoach stop there, the New Hudson Tavern that's still there today, and the barber shop, which is still a barber shop. You know, that's where you got to do your comic books and everything. And next to the barber was a little restaurant. Greyhound bus would stop, and then we had a little grocery store outside on the east of town, but we knew who they were. I rode my bike back into that little store all the time.
And they used to race go-karts in the Kroger parking lot, which the Kroger store at the time was right across from Wendy's. So I had the advantage because I was an 8-year-old kid, I was light, and I did pretty good until I crashed one day, and that pretty much was the end of that for me. You know, today, you can't do that because there'd be a lawsuit, of course, somebody would get hurt. No, they used to race every Sunday, and nobody, it was just a common thing. Of course, the population back in 58, you know, you showed me that there wasn't that many people in South Lyon at the time. And back to that, my father, he was the first person to bring Texas Longhorn cattle to Michigan.
Wow.
Yeah. And we used to keep them in a fenced area at the corner of 11 Mile Martin. I was right on the corner. And people, I was just a kid, you know, I was a teenager. And people would pull up in their cars and because the Texas Longhorns, if you ever sit there, their horns are huge. And there was a telephone pole right on the corner that had these guidelines, and they'd rub up against that guideline, but people would pull up in their cars and they'd take pictures. They thought it was so cool.
A temporary trailer park that was set up near McCaddy Park because they had no housing. They got people to come, but they didn't have any housing for them. And he said they were there for quite a while, but the city hooked it up to water and whatever.
Which was probably fine with them, because for us to live in that now, we would think, oh, please, you know, but back then it had an inside toilet, it had running water inside and all of that. So not all houses had inside plumbing.
Your dad came from the South.
No, they didn't have that either. It's nothing new to them. As a matter of fact, when my dad bought the farmhouse, it did not have an inside toilet. And my mom said, I'm not moving out there till we get one. So my dad built one there, and then we moved out to 11 Mile.
I hope that the new restaurant, the old Kroger, that was an old showerman, that's going to be a new restaurant.
It was stone building. Tommy worked there when it was a dry cleaner.
Yeah, I used to sell appliances there, but I also sold TVs and delivered everything. But also I was in control of the Secretary of State's office in that building.
Come on.
Whenever Luther left, hey Tom, take care of this, you know, how to transfer titles, you know, have
Fishing license.
and notarize stuff.
Yeah, what does it say the population was in 1960? Like 2,500?
1970, 2,675.
Because your classes, how many kids would have been graduating at a time? 100?
Yes, it was around 100, and the high school was around 500 or a little less. I remember one day going out, and a girl, I even remember her name, had ridden her horse to school. And she was in a program where she worked half-time, so she tied the horse out there, and it was a girl whose folks owned the hardware store on Pontiac Trail.
Nugent's?
Wendy Nugent. But I don't remember where, but I just remember, wow, this is really a small town.
When I grew up, there were still farms, and we had big farms, the Baylows and Geigers and Hamiltons and Wessels, and there were all these big cattle farms or dairy farms. And slowly they were being chopped up into 5 and 10 acre segments, and the horses came. People moved out and they had horses and horse tracks, show horses. I actually worked at Walter Kane's, which is where Showerman's ended up building their new store. Last I knew, that was called Bush's. Now I don't know what is that what it still is, or but that was Morgan Horse Farm. I cleaned stalls for $1 an hour every Saturday. So
Did you ever meet Zappo the buffalo?
I remember Zappo being out in the field. I didn't meet him up close and personal, but his head hung on the wall in Jimmy's restaurant for a long time after that.
And
Wow.
they had that, Mr. Kane had that buffalo out front. Did somebody tell you about that?
That is one of my questions. I found the buffalo at the Witch's Hat. And the story told to me was people used to order their cattle, pigs, sheep. They would bring them in on the train. And the farmer that came to get his little calf said, "That's not a cow, that's a buffalo."
Yeah. Well, Mr. Kane, it was his cows that were coming in. His beef cows, because he had beef cows. When it grew a little bit, it was kind of an odd looking cow, and they decided it was a buffalo. So they put it in a pen by itself and made it a pet. They called him Zippo, I called him Zippy, but he got to be huge. I mean, big as any buffalo. And a couple of times he got out and ran uptown, When I was in school, the school used to come out and we'd take little trips and go out and see him.
Because no one else has a buffalo around here.
No.
How interesting!
He just died, so I don't. And that they kept his head, put it up there in the Witch's Hat.
Back when long distance was, you had to call an operator to use long distance, so he would call his girlfriend, who turned out to be his wife, and the operator would have to call and say, "This person wants to make a long distance call and charge it to your account." And my mom would say, "Yeah, that's fine, but would you ask my son to call home every now and then?" Back in the 50s, when I started out working for my dad, there was an International Harvester dealer across the street in downtown South Lyon. The Ford dealer right across from that, which was next to my dad, sold more tractors than they did cars. And on a weekend, they'd have farmers coming with tractors, and boom, 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 and they'd be getting them fixed, and it was really small. I mean, when you have a white light on top of the only traffic signal in town that says to the one police car that you have that you should go to the police station if it's lit, you're small.
Yeah.
An awful lot different from what it is right now. Small town, everybody knew everybody. Remember the pharmacy? It had all kinds of windows on the Lake Street side. The first week or two, filling a prescription, and I heard a gunshot. Then all of a sudden, 2 more gunshots. So I look out the window, and here is a white-haired man standing with a rifle in the middle of Lake Street, shooting pigeons off the top of the Lake Street Tavern. My mouth just dropped right open. This does not happen. Where this white-haired gentleman shouldered his rifle and walked right into the bank. Nobody in town gave the whole thing a second thought.
Honey, it's possible.
Well, and then too, you have responsibilities.
Yes.
You have animals that have to be fed. You have barns that have to be cleaned. You have things that have to get done.
Did you not milk at least twice a day, if not 3 times?
Twice.
Okay.
And so we had a hired man who helped with the cows. But this is one of my really big memories of growing up. When I was in 6th grade, our hired man had some kind of health issue. So we had to pitch in and help out. Now his wife milked the cows in the afternoon, but they had young kids that she had to get off to school in the morning. So I had to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning. My grandpa would go out and bring the cows in, get them in their stalls and fed, and then I had to come down and milk the cows. We had 52 cows. It took about 3.5 hours with 4 milking machines to milk them. So usually around 8 o'clock, my dad would come in and relieve me so that I could go and get ready for school. But sometimes he was too busy doing other stuff, and I would have to finish up with the cows all, on my own. Then go take a bath or shower or whatever and get ready for school. My mom would take me, and I'd get to school at 10 or 10:30, and my classmates would say, "Hey, Suze, where you been milking the cows?" Yeah, I was milking the cows. And that went on for 6 weeks. So for 6 weeks, I had to milk the cows. I was 12 years old.
Oh my God, they put your parents in jail today for that.
My mom and dad worked at Nugent's Hardware, where Lake Street Tavern is. Ed Nugent built this building in January of 1968. February 1st, 1968, my mom and dad bought Gates Hardware, which is where you were at, where you're talking about. And so that's why people get it mixed up, because my dad worked for Nugent's from 1953 to 1968, and so did my mom, not as long as my dad did. And so that's where they get mixed up about it, because then when the Nugents sold this, still called Nugents, and then they went out of business. We moved here in '87. Our hardware store actually started up like 100 years ago.
What did you teach in high school, other than drama?
I taught history, which is really my major.
Okay.
And I taught English. People laugh at this story now. So I was in the high school, and I think it was my very first year. And the play was being directed by townspeople at that point. So one day the principal came to me and he said, "Now I've decided that you're going to take over and doing the plays." He said, "You're single and you've got lots of time, and all these other ladies are married and they have children and things. So that's your job now. No desire ever,
Jackie, you're kidding because you were good at it.
No, I had no background whatsoever. I was in the 3rd grade play one time as an angel at Christmas time. That was my experience.
Well, then how did you get so good?
I went back to school. I just took classes, which ones were available in the summer, because that's when I had to take them.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
You had to do everything, from costuming to publicity to, just setting up the cafeteria. I really liked it, and it was nice to teach a class where the kids were there by choice.
So, population explosion when the tube mill becomes popular?
Yeah, my mother's family from Missouri was 8 boys. All 8 worked at the tube mill. Okay, how'd they get here? Well, our neighbor on Whipple Street, Al Weinberger, past mayor, his job for the tube mill was to go to the south and convince men to come to Michigan to work in the tube mill. He would go around to neighboring towns, and Don Schwartz has a picture of McCaddy.
Okay.
That's who started the tube mill. They had tents set up right next to the tube mill for these married couples to live in. I think it was $1 for a single person, $2 for a married person. There was a whole plethora of these tents.
What's going on at the tube mill? They need people.
In doing history of South Lyon myself, I ran across this a few times. But during the war, there were so many people in South Lyon that were being drafted that the tube mill at that point couldn't get help. So that's when they went to Kentucky, Tennessee, Arkansas to get people to come up to work, and that's, of course, when we ended up with a lot of southern people coming up the Salt Line. The best people, the best workers in the world. In order to have someplace to do it, the tube mill then, they were all house trailer type thing. And they housed them south of the creek bed on the east side.
Well, you heard it. Town's got everything they need. They're busy, just living life. There's work to be done. But some of these kids are really growing up, and they're gonna get their driver's license, and then the world's gonna open up. Coming up, what's it like at your high school? Let's find out what the dance is like on Friday night. Let's find out if anyone's dating. Let's find out who's testing their skills against others. How will they differ from their parents because they're a new generation? Please leave your comments below. We'd love to know what you think. Please subscribe and like our channel. See new episodes every Friday, only on YouTube. I got a gratitude stone from a friend, and I looked up the word because I thought I knew what it meant. But I loved reading the words. The readiness to show kindness and appreciation and to be thankful. And I am all of these things to the more than a dozen people who were kind enough to share their stories about our small town, and I hope you will appreciate them and be grateful.